welcome to the first one of section 3. I can't believe we're at section 3 already, bridges and breakthroughs. So today we're going to be discussing between two worlds, maybe more, east, west, and everything in between, upside down, back to front. If you're down the rabbit holes with Alice, come join me. I have my tea. And today is the 2nd of October 2025. That will become apparent because obviously, you know, time stamping everything, and what I share today might be different to what I shared this time next year. So again, the 2nd of October, between multiple words. It should have said multiple words really, but I probably wasn't thinking straight then. I was just in a hurry. So let's get cracking. So why am I the person to talk about between two worlds? To look at me, you'd think, oh, she's just English. Well, you wouldn't think I was English just to look at me, but when I open my mouth, you probably would. So I've lived and worked in 47 countries, and I've learned a lot about the world. It's been pretty amazing adventure, sailing, chicken buses, Ubering. I've flown, prefer not to. I hate airports. I just can't stand all of the just the checking and the secure and the control, but that's just my thing. But today we're going to be looking at how, when you've lived and worked in so many places, what happens to your psyche, you know, and how you deal with everything that goes on, the liminality that happens, and how do we use that to thrive and create peace within ourselves and within our communities, and how are we going to see the beauty of the world that we're living in, and also seeing through the bullshit. So I could go on, as we know, those of you who've been with me a while, but today it is about looking at connection, change, and a new way forward, and how to live and thrive in cultural liminality. Lots of people have asked me, what does that word mean? I will come on to that. That's on the next slide. You know me, I like to give a definition. The beauty and the complexity of being shaped by more than one world. And I haven't mentioned it I haven't made a note to mention it, but I will do. I'm going to talk about body shape, actually, because I think that's really important. And also how the in-between spaces can be both isolating and liberating. And understanding how we make sense of that within ourselves, and why cultural liminality is often where the most creativity and change is born. And what thriving looks like when home is not one place but many, and what it is to have home inside of you. So that's the synopsis of today's show, ladies and gentlemen. I would say boys and girls, but this is probably not a boys and girls kind of show. So liminality, it's a state or place of transition, uncertainty, or disorientation, occurring betwixt and between established stages of life, identity, or existence. And it originates from the Latin word for threshold. It describes a temporary in-between period where individuals or groups are no longer their former selves and haven't yet become their future selves. And there are 3 stages: separation, transition, and reintegration. So, you know, it's pretty straightforward. You're kind of merging. We're doing it all the time. That's the beauty of this. We are living in a state of liminality all the time. And, you know, because I'm not the same woman I was yesterday, because I've learned new stuff today. My vision for things is not the same as it was yesterday, an hour ago, this morning. So it's something that people sometimes resist without realizing that we're transforming all the time. It is that we're always reaching a threshold, whether it's on our waistband, whether it's that extra mile we're running or walking or swimming, whether it's that extra level of intelligence or awareness, or it could be that we're shrinking our waistband. Hopefully, for some of us, you know, that's what our goal is. It might be that we're starting a new job. These are all aspects of liminality. So it's not just about two worlds, East and West, North and South. It is about how this impacts us in our everyday work. And understanding that actually helps in all other areas of liminality. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Crack-a-lackin'. So, a little bit of Shrek there for you, ladies and gentlemen. The first or preliminary stage is the stage of separation. And just to take it back a bit and actually look at what the separation, where we kind of start separating. Well, first we do it with our parents, we do it with our mother. You know, we separate ourselves from her body, from her womb space, the sac, and, you know, and then we become separate. And then, you know, we're totally dependent on them. And then we become more independent and we learn the word no. And it's not something that's new. Now, there are people, my dad is one of them. He's lived and worked in the same village his whole life. And, you know, he's quite happy there. So I kind of shake his molecules quite a bit. You know, he's now eating rice. So that, well done, Dad. One day I'll get him to eat hummus. It is family humor. So again, and it's like when we move and we make these shifts, we're always picking up new ideas, new ways of doing things, whether it's cutting peppers or peeling a banana or, you know, doing our hair or wearing our clothes, and all of these different things start to evolve. And they might just be in our own country. They might just be in our own region or our own province if you're in Canada. I know they call them provinces, or states if you're in Brazil, or the we say Australia. Are they states in Australia? I can't remember. But again, it's like looking at how we're shifting, you know, and as we're getting older, what are the beliefs that we hold? You know, is a friend introducing us to new beliefs? It's not about living in a different country to begin with. It is, you know, maybe they've come from a different country, or their parents have, or maybe, you know, they've traveled a lot more than we have, and they're the ones that are encouraging us to go. So again, it's about looking at the beliefs and the ideas that we have, and, you know, the values that we hold dear, because having lived, worked, and traveled to 47 countries around the world, values tend to be pretty much the same. We want to be happy. We want to be safe. We want to be able to provide for our families. We want to have fun. And we just want to be able to, you know, provide for ourselves. And, you know, we want to be good people. I've not really met anybody, even though I've been through some really dark stuff myself. Read my books, you'll find out. But I would say 99.9% of the people I've met along my journey, they all want to be kind, good, generous people, and they have been. I never felt unsafe once in my 7 years when I was traveling. One or two guys got a bit friendly. One got a knee to the balls, and, you know, and that was okay. I was protecting myself. But again, it's these changes that happen. We have to confront different things in our life, and we travel, and when we don't travel, we kind of get a belief, or we're indoctrinated by the mainstream media if we watch that, or television programming. Remember, it's called programming for a reason, and it's our vision, because they're telling you a vision of the world they want you to have. As some of you will remember from my early ones, you'll notice I don't really look at the screen very much, because I don't like the radio waves, the resonance on the blue screen. My glasses are blue screen when I'm doing a lot of writing, but I don't really like to look at the screen for lots of different technological reasons. But when we have that's a belief that I have, and it's come from a lot of research that I've done and challenged, and things that we learn, and going back to my parents, my dad, who's always lived in the same village. In the village before, when I lived there, people from London were foreigners, and it's only like an hour and a half on the train. You know, and it's You know, you would go to places like in England, we have this place called Bradistan. It's not really called Bradistan, it's called Bradford. But there's a lot of people there from Pakistan. They helped develop the textile industry in Britain. They helped, you know, a lot of the people there, you know, they came to Britain and they helped us rebuild after the war. You know, really integral part of the British community. And yet a lot of people think that you know, they're all foreigners and, you know, they don't belong there. And that's a belief system that some people in Britain have. You know, they really need to learn the history books. And learn a bit more about British society, you know, and this is the thing, it's, you know, when we have these beliefs, they can come from within our own nation, within our own community. And if people haven't left the area in which they live in, the idea is that those of us who have traveled, when we come back, and the reason I'm sharing it is important, when we come back from having traveled the world and learned about all these new cultures and languages and ways of doing things and the politics of the world and the history of the world, it can challenge people, and it does challenge people. And we discover these new parts of ourselves, like, oh, I didn't know that that was a belief that I had. Oh, I didn't know that I think that and I hold that value quite strongly. Why am I triggered by this? And this is the beauty of it. I was recently in Poland and Hungary with my youngest son, celebrating him completing school and preparing to go to university. And I was amazed at the architecture. And I realized that, having grown up in the part of the country that I grew up in, I always grew up with this, oh, all those Polish and the Lithuanians and Romanians coming here and stealing all our jobs and our women, you know, and putting us out of work. No, you're just down the pub, love. You're not working, you're smoking and having a cheeky one. They didn't want to work, a lot of them. And I mentioned the day the immigrants left as a great documentary to describe where I grew up, Read Friday Bridge, the book that this series is based upon. And when I got to Poland, I realized that there was still some of this deeply embedded narratives that weren't mine. And I'm like, oh my God, get rid of that. That's gnarly. And it was so wonderful to go to Poland. And, you know, they're not as the Polish people, they're so warm and friendly. Believe it or not, they do come with, you know, quite a straight face. And you would be forgiven for thinking that they're quite cold people, but they're so not. And their food is amazing. Oh my God, really need to go and eat their food. And the architecture was so stunning. And, you know, we have this view in Britain, we call it Eastern Europe, where we're othering other people because we don't want to be part of that because they're a bit poor. No, they're just economies of scale. And the standard of living that I saw there blew my mind, you know, and the cleanliness of it and the beauty and the oh, I just loved it. Just loved Poland and Hungary. And you know, I really do look forward to going back again, even if it is just for the pierogies and look at all the pretty buildings and the amount of flowers down the middle of the roads and the massive parks and just the genuine kindness of everybody. But then I find that in every country I've been to. And again, when you seeing this and you realize this about yourself, you're like, oh my God, that's stinking up the place there, you know, with these ignorances and these prejudices that are not ours. And remember, return to sender, this is not mine. That came from just growing up. And this is the thing, it's like, even if we don't engage with certain groups of people, there are some narratives that will seep through, and it's up to us just to get rid of them. And when we start to feel, when we're really aware, we really start to feel this shift within us. And it, you know, like I say, it's a separation from who we were to who we now are. And, you know, this appreciation. I mean, I still cannot get over the beauty of the architecture in Hungary and Poland. It was just, I took so many photos, and I'm not a city girl, and I really don't like a lot of buildings. I think a lot of buildings are just very boring. Architects have really got to get a bit more creative. Go visit Hungary and Poland. get some inspiration. But again, it was like this awareness of what I'm prepared to accept and my thoughts and my feelings towards things, and when you're letting go of them, you just like, yeah, that feels good just to take that off. It's like taking a coat off. This coat doesn't belong to me. This view doesn't belong to me. This belief doesn't belong to me anymore. And the views we have of the other world, or the understanding of why things are the way that they are. And I remember speaking to someone recently about how, people coming into a country illegally, no one enters a country illegally. They actually have to arrive in the country to actually go through the process, having worked with the Asylum Seekers Council for a short period of time way back when. And something that I keep up to date with. And unless we understand the process of something, unless we've actually walked through it ourselves, either directly or indirectly with somebody, we don't know the processes. So it's never a good idea just to assume that that's what's happening, because then we're buying into the narratives that the media are putting out there. And when we're breaking down and we're learning all this new information, it's just like, yes, like I now know I can let go of that judgment. I can let go of that. And you start, once you let go of it, it's like, it's like losing a few pounds. Once you've let go, I think you put on something new. You feel lighter and fresher, and you just. I just love traveling so much. I love unlearning, and this is what it is. It's a case of unlearning, to let go, so that you can enter the middle or the liminal stage of transitioning. Now, I remember being in Brazil, and I was chopping a pepper. Now, for those of you who don't know, I trained as a hotel manager and head chef when I went to college. I wanted to learn how to run a business. I also wanted to learn how to cook properly, and create some really great dishes. Not a baker. I like to think I am really not a baker. I don't follow enough rules to be a baker. And I'd always cut peppers and garlic in a certain way. And then I saw someone, the way they cut a pepper, and I was like, holy freaking moly, that's a brilliant way to do it. And then I saw how they cut the garlic. I was like, oh my God, that just changes the game completely. And it's these little things that that they represent all the other habits we've got so used to doing or thinking or being a certain way, that when we see a new way of doing things, we're like, light bulb. It might also be when I lived out in Egypt. One of the things that I'm going to share, and this example from Egypt, and an example from being on a chicken bus going through the Andes Mountains of Colombia. But when I was out in Egypt, I remember looking out of the window, seeing a man. I was 16 floors up, just minding my own business in my front room, typing away, and I just happened to look out, and there's a man 16 floors up cleaning the windows, tied from the building above with a bed sheet, cleaning the windows on the floor below. Brilliant. In Britain, that could, God forbid, would that happen. He had got a plinth, and he had put, I can't remember what he'd put out, but there he was. He was just there cleaning windows, bed sheet and a board that had been hung over the balcony from the. It was just brilliant. I was like, that would never happen. But they wanted to clean windows. They're willing to do anything. He was safe. Like, I mean, if he'd have fallen from that would have been interesting. 16 floors up. But again, in Britain, we've become so sensitive. So sensitive. Yes, we're aware of health and safety, and yes, health and safety, there are certain risks you want to take and certain risks you don't. But the people making the risk assessments have probably not got a very large, expansive comfort zone. And so they're making all of these risk assessments, and we're getting squashed and shrunk. They really should go and live out in a third world. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is about how you know, when we were traveling through the Andes and there was a landslide, and instead of just going, oh, well, we just got to sit here now and wait for someone to come and rescue us, the bus driver was like, hombres. And all the boys and all the men, they got up out of their seats and they got off the bus. They went to the back of the bus. They were given chainsaws and spades, and there was a couple of wheelbarrows, and you know, little boys, 3 and 4 years old, got out to help the men. And they cleared the road. They were chucking, obviously not the little boys weren't chucking the big stones, and they weren't getting thrown off, but they were carrying the smaller rocks to the side, and they were carrying the chopped trees to the side that the men had just cut from the bigger trees. So they were, I'm not making really a lot of sense here, am I? So the trees that had come down with all the rocks, the men had cut them with the chainsaw, and the little boys were picking up these logs and putting them to the side, and the larger boys were shoveling the mud off the side because it was a sheer drop. I really wouldn't have wanted to go down that side, but we were on our way in 45 minutes. And then I come back to Britain, and the National Express coach was delayed by 45 minutes because there was a reflector broken. It's only got a little crack. It wasn't the brake pedal, it wasn't the brake lights, there wasn't the headlights, there was nothing really seriously wrong with the bus. It just had a reflector, had got a crack in it. And I was, well, haven't you got a little screwdriver? Haven't you got a replacement? Because I'm not allowed to do that. I'm like, what? Why are you not allowed to do that? You're holding everybody up. People are missing their flights just because you are not allowed to change the reflector, and it really has no bearing on whether the bus works or not, or the bus is safe or not, but you're not allowed to do it. Like, oh my God, how does that make you feel? And the differences between these two countries and these two attitudes to life were so stark. And it made me realize how, you know, living in Britain has emasculated men so much and made us so precious and delicate. And I was like, yeah, kind of not my style. I don't really like that. But if I hadn't have traveled to different countries, I wouldn't have noticed that difference. And they might be quite stark differences, you know, the way I cut my pepper and the way in which, you know, people clean windows and the way that people move barriers in the way on the road. But these are things that really make you see just how precious and how we live life and we take things for granted. Now, when all of these boys and men got back up on the bus, it was so beautiful because all of the women started cheering the men and cheering the boys, kisses all around, hugs all around, celebrations, sandwiches were handed out. Well, there were more going to tacos and things like that, and empanadas that were handed out more than sandwiches. But everyone was cheering it. And by the end of the bus ride, I'd got cousins, I'd got places to stay, I'd got new uncles and aunties. And that happened because we were all in that together. You get on a bus in Britain, you don't really speak to anybody. When you get on a train with people in Britain, unless you're me, you don't really talk to people. And you can always tell people in Britain, especially in London, who have traveled because we chat, and we start laughing, and then other people just okay. But again, we start maybe speaking to them in a new language, and you know, and then other people look at you like, oh my God, she's what she's just, and I do get it. People do look at me like, oh my God, you've just spoken like 3 different languages. I'm like, yeah, I know. When you start letting go of your old self and you start opening up, you're allowing new knowledge and new ideas, and you can, it's almost like you're washing, you're having a shower all the time. It's like real beautiful energy wash. It's brainwashing of the best kind of phrase, because you're washing your brain of all of these limitations, all of these preconceived ideas, and you're opening up yourself to so many more beautiful things. And I do speak about it so positively because it is such a beautiful transformation that we go through. I mean, it says transition, but it's actually a transformation after the transition that's the beautiful thing. You know, and the way in which you hold yourself, the way in which you move in different areas, you know, and the way in which people from different parts of the world relate to you. They might see a hand gesture that you now do, Or like if you're dancing, I remember I was dancing recently and there was a song came on and it was just, I just started doing the salsa. I'd got the salsa moves going on, and then I hear a song and I start singing to it, and it's in a different language. And again, it's about relearning who you are as well as relearning about the world. Because when you start embracing these things and you find yourself surrounded by, new music, new foods, and, new things to laugh at, you just move so differently and conversations become a lot more interesting. But the downside, and there is this downside, you start to see the lies that you've been told. Now, I'm a bit of a geek, we all know that. And when I go traveling, I love going to museums. I love learning about the country, learning about history through their eyes. And you really do start to see how all the stuff you've been taught in your history lessons at school or in the geographical lessons, you realize how much of it is a lie. And every country I go to, I've had to dismantle what I think I know about the world. And that is really humbling. It's so uncomfortable because the things that you think you know about the world, you have no idea about the world. A friend of mine, he was in the Navy and he's been to all these countries, but he's never been to the countries. He went to naval ports, which, are very, yeah, insular. They're very closed off to the rest of the area. He might have gone into the city, or he might have gone to this remote island area, and they've been stationed off there. And he was in Las Malvinas, where I was when I was going down to Argentina. When I was in Argentina, those of you who don't know what Las Malvinas is, the British call it the Falklands. I'm British, but I don't call it the Falklands. For very good reasons. Do your research, find out why. Um, but he was saying that even though he'd been to all these countries, he'd never really witnessed the culture. He'd never met the people. He'd never eaten the foods or danced to the music or been to a town fair or just sat in the town square and eaten with the locals. It's not something they do. So yeah, they've traveled the world, but they haven't, not really. They've just been on a naval ship going into all these different countries. And the same thing that I was saying, I think last week or the week before, when you travel, are you traveling or are you just going on holiday? And when you've been to a country, have you been all inclusive or have you been to an exclusive location? Because if you've been all inclusive, have you actually gone and eaten with the locals from the food trucks? Have you gone and sat with them? Have you shopped the way they shopped? Have you learned anything about them? Have you learned about the things that are going on in their in their city or in their village? What are they struggling with? And when you travel and you're traveling by yourself a lot of the time, like I did, well, most of the time, I was on my own for 7 years. You you either recluse into yourself and become a complete hermit and don't speak to anybody, or you embrace meeting people randomly. Um, and you start to get to know them and you see the generosity and you see their humanity and they teach you new words and honestly, I have so many beautiful memories from my travels. You They teach you so much about yourself, like it might even to the point where they adjusted my backpack. One guy in Brazil adjusted my backpack, and oh my god, it was such a game changer. I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know my bag had that. And there were these little things that we see. And remember thinking that, gosh, if this had been things that I've witnessed here in Britain and in other parts of the world, if that man in Brazil had adjusted another woman's backpack, my gosh, the uproar that would have happened. Maybe that he would have been accused of trying to attack her or sexually assault her or, try and steal her backpack. But he was just genuinely trying to help. And you start speaking to these people and you start understanding how people are so suspicious of them. Being a mother of Arab children, I see how people are suspicious of my eldest son, not so much my youngest because of the way they look different, but also the way in which people treat my sons differently. And they go, "Oh, I'm not racist." And you kind of are. And we covered that last week. The way that they refuse to pronounce the names, get it right. Um, don't want to touch the hair. Leave the hair alone. Yes, it's different hair, but stop wanting to touch the hair. Again, it's learning the etiquettes and the manners, and whether you put your feet up on the table, you put shoes on in there, and all of these things that you learn from living in all these different cultures, and the way you eat rice, and the way in which you blend the spices, or you just tie your clothing differently. When I lived in Vanuatu, I'm telling you, I learned so many ways to tie a sarong. I was like, my gosh, one piece of fabric. I've got shorts, I've got trousers, I've got a top, I've got a dress, I've got a headband, and multiple versions of all of those. And you also see, when you have embraced that, and you start wearing things or doing things from different places around the world, or eating food from different places around the world, or you actually trust the knowledge from that place, or you've seen something and you disagree with everything that your home nation has ever taught you, that's when the backlash happens. And that's when you start to feel probably a little bit lonely, because nobody else gets it, because you are unraveling what you've always been told. And you're like, well, if I've believed these lies, what other lies have I had fed to me that I've believed? If I've believed this about a certain group of people, or I've believed this about a certain nation, or a certain religion, or cultural practice, um, where else have I been given prejudice or an ignorance around it? Which is why when I give the date on certain things, like these sessions, my knowledge changes all the time, because I'm so curious about the world we live in, and I invite feedback. I invite people to share it with me, because with the freedom that I have to travel, and the freedom I have to the access to knowledge, there comes a level of responsibility that I have to share that knowledge. Because if I was to keep it all to myself, that'd be quite selfish, really. But if I hear somebody speaking about a group of people, or a nation, or a religion, or an ethnic group, or a cultural practice, or a country I've been to, and then I know that it's wrong, or it's not what I experienced, my responsibility is to speak up for those who are being spoken about, and say, well, actually, my experience is very different, or my research is, proven different. And that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. Now, I will say what I think. Not everybody is that brave or stupid, depending on your perspective. Um, and it once you speak up, you defend those people, um or you defend the people that you've heard being spoken about, or you correct something, or you invite a conversation around the dialogue, it can be very liberating, not just for you, but also for the other individual, because you realize, one, how much you've learned, but also how much others trusted you when you were in their space and they shared with you. For example, when I was in a certain area of Brazil, there was one of the reasons why I went there, other than the kite surfing, um, amazing, um, was I'd heard this story about a 9-year-old girl being pregnant, and that, and I was like, what? You know, that's really quite shocking. A 9-year-old girl being pregnant. Well, what's going on there? But then you get to this area, and you see the lifestyle, and you see the poverty, and the lack of education, but you see the health implications of these people, and you start to understand that community. And it's not that long ago, in the grand scheme of human existence, that young girls in Britain were getting pregnant. There are still parts of the world where this is still quite, maybe not as young as 9, but still young girls, 12, as soon as they reach puberty, they're pregnant. Here in the West, we like to judge it as child bride, it's paedophilia, and it's like, Was she abused? Was she attacked? Was she groomed? And it's like, let's look at the context of this. And sometimes it's so uncomfortable because it's not what we would do. And we would think it's disgusting. And, we would think it's abusive. But when you look at the context that these people are not living much into their 30s, and they want to keep going. They want to keep their tribe alive. And some of them, other tribes were, living way into their 90s and 100. But this particular tribe, they didn't last very long. The area in which they lived wasn't very fruitful when it came to crops. And so it really does shake you. And you have to go, well, how do I reconcile this? Um, is it even for me to reconcile? It's not for me to judge, it's for me to understand. And when we understand what's going on in these different cultures and in these communities and these tribes or in these really remote areas of the world, our appreciation for what these people live with or what these people go through or how they live their life and the way they do things and walking around with just a loincloth or not even some, I felt very overdressed in a swimsuit with one group of people that I met when I was out in Vanuatu on one of the remote islands there. Everyone else was in their birthday suit. For those who don't know what a birthday suit is, that's naked. And I felt very overdressed, but the British prude in me, I was just like, I'm not getting undressed. It's just what nobody needs to see that. Again, like that's the very British thing. I mean, we don't do that. But why? It's our body. Again, all of these different. I can go over to Scandinavia and get topless, and it's fine. I can go on a beach in Spain, and it's fine. But when there are children, no. I'm a grown woman. I don't get naked in front of children. Again, different perceptions, and how are these things embedded in our brains? Who's laughing at me and my uptightness? And it's this whole thing about when we, we reconcile all of this stuff and all of our values and the things that we're just not willing to let go of, like my cup of tea in the afternoon. And, like I really like a roast chicken, rather than this kind of chicken or whatever it is, however we cook it. And are we really going to cook a lamb in the middle of the ground? Are we going to dig a hole and cook a lamb in the ground? Some people don't eat animal flesh as a whole tribe. Some people eat cockroaches. Not my choice of protein. I'd rather have some mushrooms, thank you very much. And again, it's like when we come back to where we have been raised, our nation, our home nation, and we've learned all of these things about the world, and we start listening to people from where we once came. Like, I struggle here in Britain. It's no surprise I struggle here. I'm very opinionated. I'm very open about my travels and, my ideas. And I say things that really rub a lot of British people up the wrong way. And that's okay, because a lot of what they say, it's like, oh my God, you need to get out of Britain. You need to go see the world. But again, I know that I'm very blessed that I've created a life for myself, although lonely at times. It does. Um, it's lonely at times because of what I know, because I cannot see the world as I once did. It's like, when you're skiing and you take off the ski mask and it's all normal, but when you put it back on, it's blue, and then after a while the blue looks normal. And the homogenization of communities, or people that they don't speak another language, or they haven't traveled and they haven't understood another culture. They don't know people from a different ethnicity or a different religion or a different part of the world. I find it very difficult to be with people like that, for various reasons. And they find it incredibly difficult to be with me because, one, we're triggering both of us. And it's asking a question: do I want to reintegrate with certain parts of the British culture or the certain parts of Britain? Do I want to um, reintegrate or reconnect with people that I went to school with? God, no. Um, put that out there. Do I want to reconnect with certain family members? Hell no. Do I want to, um, do I want to go and do things that I used to do? No, I don't want to believe a lot of things I used to know. I don't want that idea or those ideas or those values or the belief systems to, for want of a better word, dirty who I am now. And that might not be the right choice of word, but that's how it feels when you've cleansed yourself of the judgments and the limited view of the world. You you can't unsee. It's like sometimes when you go into I went into Cardiff city centre one night to meet a friend, and seriously, I needed bleach for my eyes by the time I got to the restaurant. And it was like I cannot unsee what I have just seen. I really wish I could. Um, it was shocking. I don't go out on a Saturday night ever. Um, so that was quite an alarming thing for me to see. When you read Friday Bridge, you'll understand when I went to my sister's wedding, I think we had only just left in Egypt 2 days, 3 days before, and I arrived back after living in Kahira, at Cairo, sprawling metropolis in Egypt, and I go back to a very small village called Friday Bridge, name of the first book, the book that this is all based on, and I'm in this village where I grew up with people that I knew that are now so much older. I mean, there was one young woman. I mean, she had her own children. I'm like, I'm still thinking she's 11. That was a bit of a shift and a bit of a head fuck. But the amount of tattoos I saw and body piercings and and um there was so much flesh on show. And it wasn't that there was so much flesh on show for Britain, it was just having lived in Egypt in a very different culture. Yes, very cosmopolitan Cairo, but still it was a bit of a shock. And the weather was a shock. And hearing English everywhere was a shock. And the music and the food. I was like, oh my God, like I don't eat this food. Like I don't want that food. And and it wasn't because I was judging them negatively. It was just such a culture shock. And I realized that I didn't fit in there anymore. I had grown in so many different ways, such as they had. And it's about owning who I was and saying, yeah, that's who my sister is, that's who my mom is, that's who these people are, and that's okay. That's the life that they're choosing. And this is who I am, and that's okay. And this is who I'm choosing to be. I don't want that life anymore. I don't want those views of the world anymore. I don't want that way of being anymore. And that's one of the most beautiful things about reintegrating into older communities that you've once left, because you realize just how much you have grown and how much you have learned about yourself and the wonderful opportunities and the people that you have met along the way who have helped shaped you into becoming the person you are. And there's so much gratitude for that. And imagine if we all stepped out of what we think we know and embrace something completely new. Um, people get excited about having a new handbag, or they get excited about going to see a new film, or they get excited about a new book, or they get excited about new friends, or, going and living in a new place, or an upgrade in the airport to getting a new seat. And that's what it is. It's upgrading your airline seat from economy class into business class, and then first class, or first class, then business class, and it's an upgrade. You are upgrading everything about you. And once you've upgraded, do you ever want to downgrade again? Look at the people who like downgrade their house, or that they've live, maybe when they're a student, they've lived in a 1-bedroom flat, they then move into a 2-bedroom home, they then have kids, they've got a 3, 4, 5-bedroom home, and then there's just the two parents who have now become grandparents. Do they stay in a 5-bedroom house, or do they downgrade and, go and live in a 2-bedroom home? You know, again, it's about looking at how these upgrades and the uh, liminality change is happening in other areas of your life, not just in the living between two worlds. Because there really is no in between. It is just constantly upgrading yourself, and it really is really beautiful, because you get to help other people understand the world in a very different way, and you get to make some really beautiful friendships around the world. People you probably won't see on a very regular basis. My friend Heisa and Adrian, I haven't seen them since I left Brazil, but we're still in contact. I've got friends in Australia and in Canada and like all over the world, and I won't see them. Some of them I'll probably never see in person again, but we still stay in contact. Um, Mary from Tenerife, like I met Mary on a bus, and I still think of her regularly, and we still email every now and again. Dee from New Zealand, and sitting in the hot tub underneath the Milky Way, drinking champagne at the top of Waiheke Island. I haven't seen Dee in ages. We had a great time. Love her. And there's just amazing, these people that come in and enrich your life and bring you so much joy. And like I said, you'll learn different languages, or you'll learn different ways of speaking. You'll learn different definitions of words and where the roots of all of the words that you use. The language transference it's so beautiful, and you go, and then you start mapping the world. You're like, okay, that's how that word got there, and that's why we use that word or that phrase, and I see that now, and everything. And it honestly is like you're just washing your brain of all of the baggage and all the dirt that's been clogging you, and you just start radiating, and you do end up with what I call Dawnglish. I mean, yours won't be Dawnglish, obviously, but I speak multiple languages all in the same sentence a lot of the time. I have really practiced this to speak only in English to you, but you will pick up if you listen carefully, you will pick up some other words. Yanni is probably one of the most common ones that you'll hear me say. But because I speak the different languages and I'll use different words, it's now become known as Dawnglish, because I'm English and I'm Dawn, and that's just how it is. And it helps us because what's that word mean? And what's that word mean? And it just becomes so fun, and people go, oh, I didn't know that. Or, when people are going on holiday, you can teach them new words, or you can teach them some etiquettes, or you can tell them about some wonderful places to go, and you can connect them with people that you know. And we make the world a little bit smaller and a little bit more welcoming and a little bit more loving, person by person, and that can only really be a good thing. And I find it very exciting, and I'm always up for traveling, and I'm always up for eating new dishes, as long as it doesn't include eating insects. I really have not got my head around that yet. Frog's legs. I can even eat a fish with head on now. Yay, yo me. So again, the things we learn about ourselves, that I seriously, like, sometimes you learn things about yourself, you go, really, Dawn, that bothered you? And when you get that, that will make you giggle. And then someone will go, what you giggling at? And you share it with them, and then you start sharing all the things that you really go, oh, why am I bothered by that? That's just a bit silly, really. And again, it's this unraveling, and it is such a beautiful unraveling if you allow it to be. And just to wrap up, because I know I could go on about this, and I'm gushing and I'm just loving it. And thank you for being here with me. Because with this freedom to travel, this freedom to learn about the world and experience it, we do have a responsibility. I did say that body shape. I just want to cover this because I said I would cover it at the top of the session. One of the things that I learned about being a woman is every country I go to, the shapes of women changes, and I actually had less insecurities about my body while I was traveling the world, because different countries, I realized how tall I was when I got to Brazil and how big my feet were, even though they're not. I realized, when I'm in the northern Europe, with the Dutch, very tall, very lean, and when you're in, like I said, Brazil, I'm such a giant, and the cavaciousness. And when I was in Egypt, like the men, they love the curves, and North America, they're not really that bothered, that there was a lot of skin people from all over the world. And, when I was in Australia, it was like, you've got to have that beach body, that toned beach body, and probably lots of tattoos. Again, like the way in which we feel about our body will change the more we travel and the more we start to love it. And well, that was my experience anyway. And home is inside of you, and it will always be inside of you if you allow it to be. Home is Houses are just bricks and mortar. Yes, they hold a lot of memories, and then for some people, having a family home is a very big thing. I realized recently that what I thought was my family home was not my family home. I moved out when I was 16. It was a bit of a shock to me that it wasn't my home. But that, and I had to really reconcile that home is within me and I can live anywhere. And we start to understand that our attachment to things and attaching ourselves to things actually stops us from growing, and it stops us from the freedom that a lot of us so desire and speak of. And just to recap, I like this phrase: real eyes, real lies, real lies. I think that's a very important thing that travel and living in lots of different countries teaches us. The world does become a lot more transparent. You do see a lot of the lies that were fed by government, and by mass media. And being alone is not loneliness. So being by yourself, you don't have to be alone or don't feel that you're lonely. Once you find peace within yourself, you'll never be alone. And choose your blessings. Choose your blessings. There's so many. And when you travel, you'll see just how many blessings that you've got. And you'll start to aspire or to let go, or all of it. Depends on who you are. And choose your networks very carefully. Because again, if you've traveled and you've liberated yourself from this monocultural view of the world, or a duocultural view of the world, when you've let go of that and you've allowed other people to enrich you, yeah, it's such a beautiful feeling. And soul will always guide you. As I keep saying, soul always knows. So choose wisely, choose joy, and choose you. And if anything has resonated with you today and you would like to speak with me about any of this, please do book a session with me. I always have it on here. And I really should update my calendar. Probably shouldn't say that to you because you're trying to book a session with me, but I will get my calendars updated. They change so quickly. So, things move around quite a bit. So please do book a session with me if you'd like to discuss this. If you're up for going traveling, but you're not quite sure how to go about it, book a session with me and I'll help you. And again, all of these narrative coaching things help you to go towards writing a book, because once you start writing about your life, or you write about an experience, or there's a subject that you want to write about, understanding who you are before you go public with your book and you hit publish. Narrative coaching is one of the most powerful things you can do before you hit publish. Because if you don't know who you are before you go public, you get any criticism from the general public, and you will, understanding who you are will actually help you ride that wave a lot easier. So please do have a look at that. Now I'm on the Potent Power of Menopause page today because I've just been working on the book, and giving it a few, because one of the things we're actually doing here at DBI Publishing at the moment is updating all of our books with the new brand DBI Publishing, and we're also looking at more sustainable ways of making sure that these books are as environmentally friendly, sustainable friendly as possible, and looking at some of the massive distribution deals that we're hoping to secure with bookstores, as well as library systems. So if you work in a bookshop, or you work in a library, or you work for a distribution company, we are in the process of doing it. We do have a number of books. These are all books I've worked on in the last 10 years. There are a few on there that is going to be increased by the end of the year. We've got 2 more books coming out. We've got Estella coming out. That is actually, I think, has Estella now gone on there? Here it is. So Estella is our latest book that's just now gone on pre-order. That will be fully launched at the end of the month. And then we have got our Owning Our Ovaries for you ladies out there that want to find yourself in a stronger position and finding your power through owning your ovaries. So we've got lots of books being updated and released, and then I've got several books being released next year. So please do visit dawnbates.com/readers and take a look. We've also got some book bundles coming out where you will be able to purchase the bookmarker, relevant mug, and some pampering products, because I'm a reader first. I know that when I'm reading a book, I want to have a mug of cocoa. I need a bookmark so I do not fold the corner over or bend the spine. And I often like to do it while I'm in the bath with a face mask, drinking a bottle of wine, maybe just not a bottle of wine, maybe a glass. So yes, we're teaming up with a couple of other organizations, so they will all be released on the website very, very shortly. So thank you so much for joining me. Remember, if you want to book a session, please do so. The link will be somewhere in the above or below this video. Visit dawnbates.com and look at the books that we've got. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoyed today. Take care. Ciao, ciao.